The British crown has stood for more than 1,000 years. It has survived wars that destroyed kingdoms, revolutions that ended royal dynasties, political battles that changed nations, and scandals that threatened to damage the image of the monarchy forever. To the world, the crown represents power, wealth, tradition, and a life that seems almost impossible to imagine. But behind the walls of royal palaces, behind the diamonds and ceremonies, there is another reality. A royal life is not only about privilege. It is about sacrifice. It is about responsibility. It is about carrying a burden that millions of people will never understand. Imagine being born into a family where your future is decided before you can even speak. Imagine growing up knowing that one day you may have to lead a nation, that every word you say will be remembered, and that every personal decision could become a historic event. For ordinary people, a crown represents everything they dream of. For some royals, the crown became something they wanted to escape. Because throughout British history, there were moments when royal family members reached the greatest position imaginable, and then made the shocking choice to give it up. They walked away from power. They surrendered their privileges. They abandoned the future that had been prepared for them since birth. Some did it because of love. Some because of political pressure. Some because history left them with no other choice. But every abdication tells a deeper story. A story about human emotions hidden behind royal titles. A story about ambition, fear, loyalty, heartbreak, and impossible decisions. Because the greatest test of royalty is not whether someone can gain the crown. The greatest test is whether they can survive the weight of wearing it. This is the story of the British royals who abdicated, the decisions that shocked nations, and the moments when they chose something more important than the throne itself. The first story takes us back to medieval England, a time when kings were believed to hold almost unlimited authority. The crown was not simply a political position. It represented the power and identity of the entire kingdom. To challenge a king was to challenge the order of society itself. But even the strongest monarch could fall. In 1307, Edward II became King of England. He inherited a kingdom with enormous challenges. England was involved in conflicts with Scotland, and powerful nobles expected the king to rule with strength and military skill. A medieval king was judged by his ability to fight, command, and protect his kingdom. But Edward II struggled to meet those expectations. His personality, political decisions, and relationships with his closest advisors created growing anger among the nobles. Many powerful figures believed that Edward gave too much influence to his favorites and ignored the traditional balance of power between the crown and the aristocracy. The conflict between the king and his enemies continued to grow. But the greatest threat did not come from a foreign army. It came from inside his own family. Edward's wife, Queen Isabella of France, became one of his strongest opponents. Together with Roger Mortimer, she organized a rebellion against the king. In 1326, their forces invaded England. Edward II's supporters disappeared. His authority collapsed. The man who had once been the most powerful person in the kingdom was suddenly unable to protect his own throne. In 1327, Edward II was forced to surrender the crown. His young son, Edward III, became king. For the first time in English history, a reigning monarch had been removed from power through political pressure. Edward II's downfall sent a message that would echo through centuries of royal history. A crown can make someone powerful. A crown can make someone respected. A crown can make someone feared. But a crown cannot guarantee loyalty. And it cannot protect a monarch who loses the support of those around him. Hundreds of years later, another royal would face an even more dramatic decision. But this time, the world would not watch a king being defeated by rebellion. It would watch a king voluntarily surrender the greatest position on earth. His name was Edward VIII. When Edward VIII became king in 1936, Britain believed it was entering a new chapter. He was young, confident, and different from previous monarchs. Many people saw him as a modern king who could bring the monarchy closer to a changing world. He understood the power of public image. He enjoyed fashion, travel, and meeting ordinary people. Many believed he represented the future. But behind the public confidence was a private battle that would soon become one of the greatest royal crises in modern history. Edward VIII had fallen deeply in love with Wallis Simpson, an American woman who had been divorced. Their relationship created a problem unlike anything the monarchy had faced before. At the time, the British monarch was also the supreme governor of the Church of England. Many political leaders and religious figures believed that marrying a divorced woman was unacceptable for a king. The government warned Edward that he could not marry Wallis Simpson and remain on the throne. The king faced a choice that would define his entire legacy. He could keep the crown, the power, the history, the responsibility, or he could choose the woman he loved. For months, Britain waited as the future of the monarchy remained uncertain. The world watched as a king struggled between personal happiness and royal duty. Then came the moment that changed history. On December 10, 1936, Edward VIII signed the abdication document. After only 326 days as king, he gave up the throne. His brother Albert became King George VI, a role he had never expected to inherit. And that unexpected change transformed the future of Britain. Because George VI became the father of Princess Elizabeth, who would later become Queen Elizabeth II. One personal decision changed the entire path of the British monarchy. But Edward's choice remained controversial. To some people, he was a romantic figure who sacrificed everything for love. To others, he was a king who abandoned a responsibility that came before personal desires. But whatever opinion history holds, one fact cannot be denied. Edward VIII did something almost impossible. He had the crown in his hands, and he let it go. And that shocking decision proved a truth that would appear again and again throughout royal history. Even the greatest throne in the world cannot force someone to stay. Mary, Queen of Scots, was a royal figure whose life showed that wearing a crown did not always mean having control over your own destiny. Born in 1542, Mary became Queen of Scotland when she was only 6 days old after the death of her father, King James V. From the beginning, her life was shaped by politics, alliances, and the dangerous world of European royalty. As a child, Mary was sent to France, where she was raised in the French royal court. She was surrounded by luxury, power, and influence. Her future seemed almost impossible to imagine. She eventually married Francis II and became Queen of France as well as Queen of Scotland. For a short time, Mary appeared to have everything. She was young, intelligent, beautiful, and connected to two of Europe's most powerful kingdoms. But royal life was never only about glory. Behind the palace walls were enemies waiting for weakness. After the death of her husband, Mary returned to Scotland to rule her own country. But Scotland was deeply divided. Religious conflicts between Catholics and Protestants created constant tension, and powerful nobles questioned almost every decision she made. Mary's personal life also became a source of controversy. Her marriages, political choices, and relationships were used by her enemies as weapons against her. The murder of her second husband, Lord Darnley, created a crisis that damaged her reputation and weakened her authority. The nobles who once served her began turning against her. The queen who had once seemed untouchable was suddenly fighting to survive. In 1567, Mary was captured and forced to give up the throne. She was made to abdicate in favor of her infant son, James VI. At only 24 years old, Mary, Queen of Scots, lost the crown she had carried since infancy. But her story did not end there. Mary escaped captivity and attempted to regain her throne. However, her actions made her a serious political threat, especially to her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I of England. For years, Mary remained imprisoned. Eventually, after being accused of involvement in a plot against Elizabeth, she was executed in 1587. But history created one of its greatest twists. Mary's son, James VI of Scotland, later became James I of England. The woman who lost her throne became the ancestor of future British monarchs. Her fall from power did not erase her importance. Instead, it transformed her into one of history's most remembered royal figures. Mary's story revealed a painful truth about monarchy. A person can be born a queen, but still spend their life fighting against forces stronger than themselves. Another royal downfall would come more than a century later, when Britain faced a battle over religion, politics, and the limits of royal authority. In 1685, James II became King of England, Scotland, and Ireland. His reign would become one of the most important turning points in British history. Unlike Edward VIII, James did not give up his throne because of love. Unlike Mary, Queen of Scots, he was not simply removed because of family betrayal. His downfall came from a conflict between the power of the crown and the changing beliefs of the nation. James was openly Catholic at a time when many powerful people in Britain feared Catholic influence. His attempts to give Catholics greater rights created suspicion among those who believed he was threatening the Protestant identity of the country. James believed that a king had the authority to make decisions without interference. But many leaders believed the monarch had limits. The crisis became even worse in 1688 when James's son was born. The birth created the possibility of a Catholic royal succession, causing many political figures to fear that the future of Britain would change forever. A group of powerful leaders invited William of Orange, the Protestant husband of James's daughter Mary, to take control of the country. William arrived in England with an army. James' support collapsed. The king fled. Parliament declared that James had effectively abandoned the throne. In 1689, William and Mary became joint monarchs of England. The fall of James II changed the future of British monarchy forever. It proved that the crown was powerful, but it was not unlimited. The monarch could no longer rule without considering Parliament and the political will of the country. James' story showed that sometimes a royal does not need to sign an abdication document to lose power. Sometimes, history itself removes the crown. For centuries, these stories were remembered as examples of kings and queens losing their thrones. But behind every political event was a human story. A person who faced impossible choices. A person who carried pressure most people would never understand. Because royalty may look like a life of perfection from the outside, but history reveals something very different. The crown can bring greatness, but it can also bring loneliness. And sometimes the hardest decision a royal can make is deciding whether the crown is still worth keeping.